and welcome back. Next up, a very favorite guest of ours. She always adds a little sass to the subject of wine. It's Natalie Maclean talking about her book, Unquenchable.
And the title really says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, a tipsy quest for the world's best bargain wines.
Here's Natalie, and I promise I won't call her Nancy this time. Natalie Maclean, welcome back to On the Menu, and thank you for communicating with us all the way from the 51st state.
Peter and Ann, it's great to be here.
And I wanted to start with a story that's a little bit that you're not expecting and that Ann's not expecting. Because I lived in Australia for a number of years. Australians are known for loving their beer, probably even more than their wine. And a good friend of mine at the time said something very philosophical. He said, Peter, there's no such thing as bad beer. It's just that some beer is better than others. Now, I'm guessing that Natalie Maclean, among others, would say that does not apply to wine. And I think you have an observation about that at the beginning of your book when you answered the question, is it possible to get a wine worth drinking for $5 a bottle? And what was your answer?
Not unless all you want is a wet tongue, yes. No. There is some really bad stuff out there.
Now, the funny part about it is that let's suppose you change the price to €5,
we're talking a possibility,
and you positioned yourself in many places in Europe, you would get an entirely satisfactory bottle of wine. In fact, even down as low as €3, you will still get wine with a bottle and a cork and a label on it and a vintage, something that might not be great wine for the cocktail hour, but good to go with food.
I mean, it's not just the exchange. We pay a lot when we're transporting wine from Europe, and then there's all the taxes that our dear governments impose on them. So, €3, you could probably find something great if you were in Europe drinking the local vino.
Well, what did we spend on that awful stuff we got out of the thing that looked like a gas pump?
That was like one... Well, it was lira in those days, but it was the equivalent of about €1.50, but the quantity you got was considerably larger.
It
was like they had this like filling station for wine, where instead of filling up your car, you filled up your jug.
Well, that sounds really appetizing.
Well, I didn't.
It was very popular.
I didn't think it was all that bad, but you have dedicated yourself, Natalie, to the pursuit of the bottle of good wine that's still affordable.
Yes.
And the world thanks you for this.
My liver doesn't, but, anyway.
You've written one book on the subject. You have a website, nataliemaclean.com, which does this from day to day. And the reason we're talking today is we just got your second tome, Unquenchable, a tipsy quest for the world's best bargain wines. And you are the author of Red Wine and Drunk All Over. I'm not sure what you're going to call your next book. I can hardly wait.
Yeah, me too. I don't know yet.
So the approach you took in this book was a little different than one might imagine that one would take, in that instead of just going back into your mental library of all the excellent, inexpensive wines you've drunk, you decided to do something geographical. Perhaps you can explain.
Absolutely. Well, what I found from the first book, Red, White, and Drunk All Over, was that people really liked the armchair travel aspect to it. So not all chapters, but some of them had journeys out to wine regions. So I thought, well, I think I would like each chapter in the second book to be a different region and travel-based, so that if you wanted to go there yourself, you'd have some insider tips. Or even if you never make it, you have a sense of what the place is like. And so the subtitle is all about bargain wine, so I wasn't going to go to Bordeaux and Burgundy. I'm sure some people might think they're bargains if you have a trust fund, but most of us don't. But there are many more regions that offer bargains than are in the book, but there's a limit to number of pages and so on. So I crowdsourced it with my website subscribers, as you mentioned, at nataliemaclean.com, and asked them where did they think the best regions were, and more importantly, where were the colorful, iconic winemakers whom I could interview about their wines, who would really tell the story of that region and that wine, because I think that's what really makes it come to life.
Yeah, absolutely true. There are some fascinating stories. Quite a number of the people in the book we actually know. We've met ourselves, or we've heard of them. But I was interested in whether or not you could just quickly, for those people who are too mean to buy the book or too lazy, you picked 8 regions altogether.
That's right.
Australia.
Argentina.
Germany. I'm taking them in the order.
Oh, you are? Okay, yeah.
Germany. Then, for reasons which we've discussed before you came on the air, but which we won't reveal now, the Niagara region of Canada.
Yes.
The Cape Crusaders of South Africa, a part of Italy which used to be known for plonk, big red plonk, the island of Sicily, which we love so well, a smouldering liquid Tango from Argentina, a storm of pleasure in every port. Portugal, of course. And then finally you land up in Provence, because I guess you must be a great Peter Mayle fan, and one of these days you're going to write a book called A Year in Provence Making Wine. Assuming they'll let you call it that.
We'll see.
So, Australia used to make plonk, started making excellent wines only within the last 30 years or so, as you note. But was there a particular thing that drew you there?
Well, I think Australia has been so successful in the North American market in terms of introducing its wines, and it's had several waves of success and some waning in between times. So there was the Australian invasion, I guess, in early 2000s, if you will. And then it fell out of favor as people didn't want big oaky wines. But then I think now it's coming back again as they're focusing on regional differences and that sort of thing. But I think the Australians were the first to transform wine into liquid food, to make it accessible at a reasonable price. And so you have these big, juicy, fleshy Shiraz red wines and, of course, nice buttery Chardonnays, among others, of course, but they kind of led with those and were really good at it.
Did you try some of the Tasmanian wines?
I didn't get there on the trip, but I'm a big fan of Tasmanian Pinot Noirs because it's, as you know, a cool climate, and it has wonderful, big cherry flavors that are nicely balanced with some acidity for food.
I think the Australian winemakers, are also getting much more finesse about what they do. So they're working with difficult grapes like Pinot Noir, not only in Tasmania, but in the Mornington Peninsula. We ventured to Western Australia the last time we were there, and there's a whole book full of great wines just in that one part of the country.
Absolutely, and people think of Australia as all warm climate. I mean, technically warm climate for wine growing. And it's not. There are cool areas like Tasmania or, the Mornington Peninsula, the Clare Valley. They produce marvelous, very nervy, edgy wines of Riesling and Pinot Noir, where you'd cool climate wines like Riesling and Pinot Noir that you would find in other regions as well.
Now, we were just at a big food meeting called Chefs Collaborative in Seattle, Washington. Sitting at lunch one day, the gentleman sitting next to me was obviously Australian by accent, so we asked him where he was from, and he said Geelong. It turns out that Peter lived in Geelong for 4 years in the 1970s, but the most interesting aspect of that was that when Peter lived there, Geelong was known for sheep. There were no wineries anywhere.
Wow.
Now there are great wineries along the Bellarine Peninsula, as it's called, equally as important as the ones in the Mornington Peninsula, and it just shows you how quickly things can change.
If they had them, because if you remember, we kept the wine diary of everything we drank day by day, and when we got back to the States, you couldn't get any single one of them.
Oh no, because the quantities being produced by these wineries then were very small. Now you have people who are capable of exporting in quite large quantity. Even top wines like Grange, you can still get, because they're catering for a worldwide market as well as a local market. When we were dealing with it, people were just making for a domestic market that was pretty small, because nobody was interested in Australian-made wines unless they just couldn't afford anything else. Now you go to Germany. Now you go to Germany next, and the Moselles and Rieslings of a country which I guess wines fell into disfavor. And you explained very clearly why that was.
Well, I think we perhaps remember the days of Blue Nun and Black Tower, and perhaps the vice grip of a sugar headache from those wines.
I remember it well.
It's hard to forget. We'd like
to. As the dripping candle in the bottles.
Exactly. Excellent for macrame as well. But that's one of the reasons Germany is a great value. So it's kind of one of those tips when you're looking for, which regions do offer great values? Well, a region that is still trying to kick a bad reputation, even though it's undeserved today and goes back 10, 20 years ago, still they have that hangover image of those sweet, syrupy wines, and they also have labels that are difficult for the most part to pronounce or read for Anglophones at least. And so you combine that, and German Rieslings and now even their Pinot Noirs are an amazingly great value on the shelf.
I was just going to give you 3 words to describe a latest interesting wine bargain, because we just got back from Berlin. German Pinot Noir. Yes.
Yeah, that's a sort of, I think, the up-and-coming wine from Germany. Not many people have tried them. They're not as prevalent as the Rieslings, but they're terrific.
The Chardonnay was really
good. We also tried a Chardonnay with a German oyster, and that was extremely good. But it was a very lean Chardonnay, a lot like an unoaked Oregon Chardonnay,
right?
Or an unoaked Australian Chardonnay for those who know those wines well. Now let's go on. We mustn't hesitate here. We have to go on to another Pinot Noir focused region, one that's known for its ice wine and other, shall we say, unfortunate things to do with wine. But to the extent that they can keep the starlings off the grapes, Pinot Noir apparently grows very well in the Niagara region, which is something I didn't know.
It does. Niagara is a cool climate, and we're talking the Canadian Niagara region. Of course, you've got on the other side of the border, New York State has a vibrant and growing wine region itself. But in the book, I focus on Niagara. And again, I find Niagara and Riesling are kind of like red and white twins, and I don't mean that clonally or technically, but where you find great Pinot Noir, you'll also usually find great Riesling. And one thing that I explain in the book is that bargain doesn't just absolute rock bottom price. It's that price-quality ratio, what you get for what you pay for. And so what I was looking at, because some of these Pinots from Niagara are $20-$30, some of them, the premium. But if you look at comparable quality from Burgundy, France, or elsewhere, even though I know the stylistic differences, it's still quite a bargain.
Okay, well, let's cross the world again and go back south to South Africa, the Caped Crusaders. Here you're dealing with a wine culture that I guess suffered a great deal because they got kind of lazy because so much of the world wouldn't trade with South Africa for such a long time.
Exactly. So apartheid cut off their markets, their export markets, but also incoming technology, expertise, transfer of information. So again, you're looking at a region that suffered because of that and is now making big steps for recovery and offers tremendous value. Their flagship wine is Pinotage, which I'm hot and cold on depending on who's making it. My favorites and more dependable, I think, are Shiraz and Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay, so let's go to Anne's favorite part of the world, the island nation, she would call it, I guess, of Sicily, where her ancestors came from. And you focus in on a particular area, a fascinating area of wine growing on the slopes of an active volcano.
Yes, Mount Etna. There's nothing like volcanic ash to make a nice finish in your wine. So Nero d'Avola is one of their grapes. They make luscious red wine. So if you like Shiraz or Malbec or whatever, you'll love Sicilian reds. They've come a long way, again, in their techniques. It's an old winemaking culture, but it was very rustic. It's modernized. And the insider tip here is, typically in traditional winemaking countries like Italy or France, the northern regions developed first and have the name. So Tuscany and Piedmont are very expensive in Italy. Go south to Sicily or even Sardinia. In France, it would be Bordeaux or Burgundy. Go south to Languedoc-Provence, and you're going to find more bargains.
Funnily enough, and I don't know if you've had the opportunity to explore this region, but we met a group of winemakers from the region of Calabria at a wine event in New York, and it was interesting to have one young man who's the present owner of the family vineyard, I guess. But it was founded by his grandfather, his great-grandfather, who made money in the wine business by growing grapes, making grape juice, and sending it to Piemonte to make the Barolos more powerful.
Exactly, and that was happening in France too. They'd get from their southern neighbors, which had a lot more sun, more ripening, more robust but rustic wines. They'd get the big tankards coming up, the trucks at night, pulling up to the back and giving a little bit of extra fuel to those wines.
Now tangoing, I guess, goes with wine. Now, Miss Anne would love to learn how to tango, but we're probably a little late in life to do that. But
never too late.
Curiously enough, we met a gang of winemakers in Paso Robles, California, used to hire somebody to teach them to dance tango on Tuesday nights. Now, it is not written how much Pinot Noir they drank at the same time as they were doing that. Probably some. But that's a backwards way of getting us to the country of the famous Argentine tango and what you call a smoldering liquid.
Yes, I couldn't avoid that word, smoldering. It goes with tango, and it goes with their famous Malbec red wine. Very luscious. I think somewhere stylistically between a Shiraz and a Cabernet or a Merlot. So it's got all the juicy, fleshy black fruit. I think a bit more structure and finesse than, say, an Aussie Shiraz.
One of the most interesting things I think about that is the whole concept that Malbec didn't originate in Argentina. It actually originated in a part of France, southwestern France, I think, and they almost stopped growing it, and now they started growing it again.
Exactly. So Argentina has made it a flagship standalone red wine. In France, including Bordeaux, it was always part of a blend, and it was there to add color and robust body weight to it. But the Argentines do it very differently because they are just focusing on a single grape, and it has a lot of roundness, a lot of finesse. Again, they've come a long way in their technique.
And a storm of pleasure in every port. Portugal, known for sweet wines, mostly for the market for sweet wines in my native land, and the reason that I understand that Portugal is known as Britain's oldest ally. But here you found conventional wine grapes growing in the same region, famous for its port.
Yes, so port, I think, is one of the most undervalued wines in the world. It is a dessert-fortified sweet wine, but I think that people look at it and think, oh, that's going to be alcohol levels like whiskey, which is not true. It's only about 20%. When you're looking at spirits, it's double that or more. People also get a little off-put by sweet, but this, when sweet is balanced with all kinds of other complexities or acidity or whatever, it comes off as a very satisfying after-dinner drink. Also, though, as you mentioned, they're growing red grapes and making dry, red, robust table wines from grapes that are very obscure, traditionally used for port, and are producing some surprisingly very modern styles of red wine. And
interestingly enough, wines that sell in the Pennsylvania State Liquor Store, which we're stuck with here in Pennsylvania, at a price point of $8 or $9 a bottle,
right?
Which is not quite your magic $5 a bottle, but it's sure a hell of a lot better than that in taste.
Exactly.
And then you couldn't resist, I guess. You just had to go back to France.
Yes.
And the wonderful, the region which provides the world with rosé, a much maligned wine. Mm-hmm. I think you will agree.
Yes.
And I think we only have one tip that I picked up somewhere along the way, and you can confirm whether this is really true. Often a sommelier or a wine waiter will try to impress you by suggesting to you that this wine that is 2005 is going to be better than this wine which is 2010 vintage because it's spent more time in the barrel, more time in the bottle. And I understand in the case of rosé that's absolutely the opposite is true, and that you should be drinking last year's if not this year's.
Precisely, yeah. Rosé is meant to be fresh, quaffable, and of the moment kind of pleasure. But it is, again, this is one of those tips. It's a maligned grape or style of wine, just as Germany was a maligned country, so you're getting great value. And from Provence, whenever you go to Provence or even the Rhone Valley of France right above it, especially Tavel, you're always getting a dry style. They don't make sweet. So if you're uncertain and you don't want a sweeter rosé, you want a bone-dry, refreshing aperitif or something to go with food, you're guaranteed to get that if you go with Provence.
And listeners, a final thought for you, because we've taken an awful lot of Natalie's time. If you want more of the same conversation, if you want more of the same information, www.nataliemaclean.com. Her blog and all the other resources on her website are available to you. I'm sure she answers email as well. And
yes.
We thank you so much for joining us today. It was fun to tour the world with you in search of affordable wines, and we thank you so much for your insight and conversation.
Well, thank you, Peter and Ann. You have a great weekend. Enjoy some good wine tonight, I hope.
Yeah,
yes,
I hope
indeed.
So.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So there you have it. I hope you learned a lot in this week's program, all about wines, and that you'll put it to use on your next purchase, and that you'll enjoy your further exploration of wine even more because of these really wonderful guests in today's program. And we'll be here, same time, same place next week. We hope you will be too.
Bye-bye.